This is Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. One of my favorite shows of the past decade was Succession. If you haven't seen it, it follows the lives of an ultra-wealthy media mogul and his 3 children. Well, 4. Watching it kind of felt like an anthropological study. What is it like to have a yacht, a private jet, and make decisions at work that can shape presidential elections? Like any good fiction, Succession was based very much on our reality. Just like the fictional Roy family, the ultra-rich in the U.S. have a profound impact, not just on our politics, but our daily lives. Chuck Collins argues in a new book that influence is largely negative. His book is called Burned by Billionaires: How Concentrated Wealth and Power Are Ruining Our Lives and Planet. It came out last month. Chuck Collins lives in Guilford, and he's no stranger to wealth himself. His great-grandfather was Oscar F. Mayer of the hot dog fame. In the 1980s, when he was in his 20s, Chuck gave away his inheritance, which would have been worth millions today. He's a member of the Patriotic Millionaires, which is a nonpartisan group of wealthy Americans who advocate for higher taxes for the rich and higher wages. Chuck is also a director at the Institute for Policy Studies and the author of over 10 nonfiction books, most of which focus on economic inequality. He writes the Oligarch Watch column for The Nation, and he joins us today from Vermont Public's Brattleboro studios. Chuck Collins, welcome to Vermont Edition.
Hi, Michaela. Thanks for having me.
We're very glad to have you with us today, and we are glad to have you, our listeners, with us as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the conversation that we're about to have with Chuck Collins. Do you think extreme wealth is something to aspire to or something that harms our society? Do you see evidence of extreme wealth in our region? You can give us a call and weigh in during this conversation at 800-639-2211. You can also email vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. Now, Chuck, one of the things I really appreciated about your book, Burned by Billionaires, was how you define your terms. When we talk about wealth and extreme wealth or the rich or the ultra-rich, all these terms I was just throwing out in my introduction to you, they could mean a lot of very different things. Tell us, what population are you focused on in this book?
Yeah, thanks. What I tried to do is kind of give a roadmap to Richistan. Is it the top 10%? Is it the 1%? Is it just the billionaires? And what I zeroed in on was, where does the power reside? And I kind of fixed the line, if you will, sort of around the $30 to $40 million mark, people who are in that top 1/10 of 1%, who have, if you have $30 million, your needs are met, your children's needs are met, you're probably flying private jet, you may not quite have a yacht yet. But once you sort of go above that level, you're not just buying mansions and private jets, you're buying senators and media outlets, and you're using your power to capture the political system, influence our governance, and use your investments to squeeze and scoop up lots and lots of assets around the country. So I say let's focus in on that top 1/10 of 1%. When I talk about the billionaires, it's really that ultra-wealthy group, the top 1,000th of all the households in the U.S.
Let's name some names here. Who exactly are we talking about?
Well, I think some of them are well known to us. I think of someone like Larry Ellison, who's not as well known, except recently But here's a guy who lives in Hawaii, owns an island, powers his yacht that consumes about 7,000 tons of carbon a year. Is buying up media outlets, buying up intelligence and data activities. So, we can point to dozens and dozens of the very ultra wealthy, along with people who are moving money into what people call private equity, which is just pools of investment money that are touching our day-to-day lives. And that's really the point of this, is to say, how does this disrupt everyday life? Housing costs here in Vermont, taxes, how much our local property taxes are, the environment, your sense of health and well-being. All those things, I think, are being touched by this ultra-wealthy group, extreme wealth inequality.
Yeah, so you write in the book about the extremely wealthy's influence on issues that are talked about a lot, like emissions or housing affordability, like you just said. But you also discuss some other issues that people might not think about, but still factor into the budgets that we make for ourselves and our families and our communities every day, every year. One of the families that you've written about is the Mars family, which people might know control candy brands like Mars bars and Skittles, but they also have this stronghold on the pet care industry, which I did not know about. I'm wondering if you could kind of tell us a little bit more about them and explain how that type of wealth concentration in a family like the Mars family is making people pay more for things like pet care by cornering the industry.
Yeah, it's an example I didn't set out to write about. It's something I learned about while I was writing the book, but it makes sense in that what the billionaire investor private equity folks are looking for is captive markets, places where people will pay more money and are willing sometimes to be squeezed. And a lot of our animals and pets are members of our family, and the investor class has realized, people are willing to pay. They're even willing to go into debt to take care of these animals. So what we've seen is billionaire investors like the Mars family, these huge dynastically wealthy families, are moving into certain markets. We know about human health care. They're buying up emergency rooms and hospitals and pharmaceutical companies and medical specialties. It never occurred to me that they're coming after our pets, veterinary clinics, food services, specialty medical help for dogs and cats, even the dog walking services. So there's an app called Rover.com where, Michaela, if you need your dog walked and I'm a dog walker, we can find each other, and Rover.com will skim off a pretty good chunk. Well, it turns out Blackstone, a giant $1 trillion private equity fund, bought up this pet app. And this is basically what I would say, and look in every corner of our economic lives. What do we spend money on, and what's sort of being bought around us? What are the businesses that are being bought up by these large national and international conglomerates that are basically trying to squeeze a little bit more out of our daily budget? That's their business model. Squeeze us a little harder.
For the average person who is figuring out how they want to spend their money and what businesses to support, where to send their dog for doggy daycare, how can people figure out these complex chains of ownership to understand this business down the street is actually part of a much larger conglomerate that is part of this system you're describing that is consolidating wealth?
Well, this is an important role for journalists to help us sort of figure out who's buying up our communities. Here in Brattleboro, at the beginning of the school year, we had a school bus strike, and the school bus drivers wanted a small raise, and they were locked out. And we thought it was a locally owned bus company. It turns out that 2 years ago they'd been bought by this global private equity fund who's not going to pay their workers anymore. They're trying to lay off workers and squeeze. So it's a bit of just like mapping, asking people, that veterinary clinic, for instance, veterinarians, the investors know they want to kind of maintain a mom and pop facade sometimes. So it's really saying, so who owns you? Who owns your clinic? If you have had the unfortunate experience of having to go to a hospital or emergency room, now you get like 6-7 bills from the anesthesiologist group and this group and this. You realize, these are all owned by different investor groups that are investing a lot in billing because they're sending us a lot of bills. So all across our pocketbooks and purses and budgets, we're seeing the squeezes on, and this is. I call it the billionaire burn. We are being burned by the billionaires in lots of invisible ways that we don't fully understand. And it is a challenge to kind of figure out how do we look upstream and try to understand who really owns us and who's putting the squeeze on us.
Well, Chuck, I appreciate you using that local example of the Brattleboro bus drivers. If you'd like to learn more about it, we had on the local head of the Teamsters Local 597 union, which represented the school bus drivers in Brattleboro, as well as monitors, as they negotiated a new agreement with the company Travelcuz. That was earlier in the fall. Chuck, there there's a lot going on here that can feel very hard for a regular person to feel like they have any control over. Well, one thing we can control is who we elect to Congress to represent us, to make laws and shape our tax policy in the U.S. Here in Vermont, of course, we're represented in part by Senator Bernie Sanders, who is very publicly anti-billionaires. He even has a new book out on this subject called Fight Oligarchy. I'm curious what you think of Senator Sanders' role in this push against billionaires, against an oligarchy, and this rallying cry about how billionaires shouldn't exist at all.
Yeah, I actually think our senior senator is right on. I've known him since he was the mayor of Burlington, and I worked on the Champlain Housing Trust startup back in the day. He's been talking consistently about the dangers of concentrated wealth. He's naming this an oligarchy, which I think is a really helpful way to understand what we're living through. This is what an oligarchy looks like when you have a couple thousand multimillionaires and billionaires really dominating and ruling our society. So, and I think, the fact that he's going out and doing public events all over the country, we Vermonters have lent our senator to the larger world when it comes to that. He's really being an important voice. And he's, we all around the country, we need to elect candidates who are going to basically say, I'm going to work for working people. I'm going to work for expanding the middle class, not just an economy that lifts up billionaires. And what I'm trying to do in this book is to say, it's a system. The way the rules of the economy right now are rigged is to funnel wealth to the top, and it's not a good sign. We want fewer billionaires and more thousandaires. Those 40% of the population that has like no financial reserves. We want more people to have financial reserves. We want people to have money, a cushion to fall back on. And an economy dominated by billionaires is moving us in the wrong direction, fast, very quickly.
Is there such a thing as a good billionaire?
I think it's not about the individual personalities. There are some billionaires who are very concerned about these trends of inequality, have pledged to give away all their wealth in their lifetime. There's a guy I knew actually named Chuck Feeney who started the duty-free shops, who, at one point had like about $9 billion and gave it all away and, died a modestly wealthy person, not a billionaire, in an apartment in San Francisco. He lived an exemplary life. So I think there's examples, but this is really about a system of rules and laws and policies which has been lobbied for and put in place by the billionaire class. But yeah, it's not about the individuals. It's sort of about the way the system is now on autopilot to make inequality even greater.
And you're saying to change this system, to fix this system, if you see it as wrong, we can't leave it up to individuals to give away their fortunes, as you did many years ago. But we need to change the tax codes, the larger systems that govern our society to affect some lasting change.
Yeah, and I think that philanthropy, people talk about charity. Oh, isn't it great? The billionaires are giving money to charity, and some of them are quite generous. But actually, we would be, charity is not a substitute for an effective tax system where billionaires are paying their fair share and where there's more or less some accountability. You have to wonder about that today. But anyway, the reality is philanthropy has become a taxpayer-subsidized form of private power and influence. So we should be sort of skeptical when we hear about the beneficent billionaire and say, well, we'd be happy if you actually paid your fair share of taxes. That's really what we aim for here.
We're speaking with Chuck Collins, a wealth inequality researcher and the author of the new book, Burned by Billionaires: How Concentrated Wealth and Power Are Ruining Our Lives and Planet. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this conversation that we're having, or perhaps you have read some of Chuck's other work. Call in and tell us what you think. 800-639-2211 is our number. You can also email Vermont Edition at vermontpublic.org. We have to take a short break, but we will take your calls when we come back. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. If you're just joining us today, our guest is Chuck Collins, an author from Guilford. His new book explores how the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of the top 0.01% of Americans negatively affects all aspects of our society. The book is called Burned by Billionaires. Chuck is also a director at the Institute for Policy Studies and has authored many books about inequality. You can join the conversation by calling 800-639-2211. Chuck, as I mentioned earlier, you inherited hundreds of thousands of dollars when you were in your early 20s. Your great-grandfather was Oscar Mayer of the meat packing company that's famous for the Oscar Mayer wiener. And just a couple years after you got all that money, you gave it away. You donated it. This was back in the 1980s. First, I'm curious, since you write so much about dynastic wealth in this new book, how your own family reacted to that decision that you made. Did they give you props? Were they proud of you, or did it lead to any rifts?
Well, it was I should say, I hope that the Wienermobile parked outside your studio isn't blowing my cover or anything. But I could tell you a lot of good bologna and hot dog jokes. But, in the end, my decision was really rooted in both a personal and sort of societal sense that too much inherited wealth is not really a good thing in a society. Helping your kids a little bit makes sense, but passing on huge dynastic fortunes where people don't have to work and completely is not good for the kids, and it's not good for society. And that's kind of what we're seeing now in hyper mode. We're seeing the emergence of these huge wealth dynasties. So, yeah, my family was a little concerned, but again, I was in my mid-20s. We're all concerned about our children in our 20s, what they're doing. But in the end, nobody, my father particularly said, well, you did the right thing. At some point, families, the wealth has to stop accumulating. It should be dispersed either through charity or taxes or just by having children. That's what good societies look like. So kind of moving in the opposite direction where, if we don't intervene in the cycle of inequality, a generation from now, the sons and daughters of today's billionaires are just going to dominate our politics, culture, economy, philanthropy. You may think we're there already, but we're moving toward a kind of almost new neo-feudal society with our own monarchy and aristocracy. That's not a good place to live, and it's not a good place if you're not born wealthy, because you see how the rules of the economy now are harder for people to just have a decent life, let alone have prosperity. That's the challenge for many, many people. The ladder is being pulled up, if you will.
Well, this conversation is eliciting many thoughts from our listeners, so let's go to the phones now. We have Charles calling in from West Rutland. Charles, go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to talk about, the wealth is always a moving target. And I voted for Obama, Biden, and Harris. But when, Bernie Sanders used to say millionaires, they're not paying their fair share until he became a millionaire. And then it got bumped up to billionaires. And when he ran for president, he had an adjusted gross income of $650,000 and gave $19,000 to charity. And that is a paltry sum. I know people that don't have anything and they tithe in their church. And I just think it's hypocritical for him to fly around in private jets and ask me to drive around in an electric roller skate. And I appreciate what, your point, but I do agree that it's a moving target. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Charles. Chuck, what do you think? Particularly Charles's point there that the folks who might be advocating for these changes to our system, saying no to billionaires, are often, in fact, quite wealthy themselves compared to the average American.
Yeah, I think that's a distraction, really. I mean, there's no question Senator Sanders is deeply committed to economic fairness and working people. He's not, if he has to take a private jet because he's got to get across the country to speak at 3 more events, I don't begrudge him that. I'd like to see his visibility be out there. So I think that the real issue is it's not a moving target. We're the billionaires, that 1/10 of 1%, their share of wealth is just rising extraordinarily. I mean, today I looked up the data coming to talk to you. We have 916 billionaires with over $8 trillion combined. And their wealth has gone up, the billionaires class has gone up $5 trillion since the 2017 tax cut. So
and these
that's
are all Americans, or is this global?
This is just U.S.
Okay.
Just the U.S. billionaires, there's about 3,000 billionaires globally, but about a third of them live in the U.S. And their share of the kind of wealth pie it's dizzying to imagine. And the fact that Senator Sanders is out there, he could be home with his grandchildren. He's out there fighting every day for working people. I don't have any doubt about that. I don't begrudge him at all.
Well, thanks for your thoughts, Charles, and for the question. John
thanks,
is
Charles.
in Waterbury Center. John, what are your thoughts?
Yes, hi. Good afternoon. It's a fascinating topic, and I'm really interested in picking up the book. My question is, once somebody gets past their first, 5 or 10 or 15 million, what's the motivation for more? Is it simple greed? Do they think that they can maybe at some point do some good, or are they just gathering a nest egg for their heirs? What exactly is the motivation?
Thanks, John. What do you think, Chuck?
Well, thanks, John. I think first should say the ultra wealthy are not monolithic. I think people have different motivations. I think, though, what I see is people who focus on getting more once they sort of hit that $30 million mark. It's about power, the power to shape the environment and the power over others. It's about legacy. People want to live forever, and so they want to have their name on a building at a hospital or university. It is about dynasty. It's about setting up the next generation, the great-grandchildren who haven't even been born yet, creating trusts and dynastic trusts for their. But in the end, a friend of mine, Scott Ellis, who's a Silicon Valley millionaire, says, look, I'm a millionaire, but I don't need $30 million. Once you sort of hit that, you really are talking about power. And that's where we should, as a society, wave the flag. Here in Vermont, we have, the Koch brothers, a giant dynastically wealthy energy family, pouring money into influencing our state legislature when it comes to energy policy. It's the wielding of power is when we should really take notice. And yeah, I would like, Senator Sanders, I like to try my Bernie imitation. He says, under the socialist presidency of Dwight Eisenhower, the wealthiest 1% paid, significantly 90% of their income, and we invested in debt-free education, infrastructure that benefited everybody, affordable housing. You get the point. We used to tax high levels of wealth and invest it in things that actually made working people's lives better and helped build a middle class. In those decades after World War II, 1945 to 1975, we really did see the rising tide lift all boats, not just the yachts. And by the 70s, the racial wealth divide is narrowing and the gender income gap is narrowing. We were starting to move toward becoming a relatively healthy shared prosperity economy. And now we've taken this other turn, decades moving in the wrong direction. But we know how to do this. We know how to create a shared prosperity economy where the wealthy pay their fair share and the whole society benefits from greater equality.
Well, I'm hoping we can have Senator Sanders on the show soon for many reasons, but in part to play him your interpretation of his voice and see what he thinks. Let's go next to Alex in Poultney. Alex, go ahead.
I really appreciated that Bernie impression. What you said about investing or creating more thousandaires really resonated with me. And it seems that one way to potentially do that is to have a policy of universal basic income. And I'm wondering, how could we implement that here in Vermont?
Yeah, Alex, I think it's a really important question, especially with AI technology and self-driving cars and sort of all these developments that are going to just eliminate so millions of jobs. How will people live? And even sort of far-sighted Silicon Valley billionaires are saying, hey, you know, maybe we should have a universal basic income. They're kind of sort of asking the question, how do we prevent, devastating pulling apart of our society? I think what I would say the formula is, let's tax huge extreme wealth and invest in things that make a difference. So taxing super high incomes. And I think it's hard to do this in Vermont, by the way, I should say. You know, we're a small state. We have maybe one billionaire. We don't have the level of wealth that you see in other states. So ideally, these would be federal solutions. However, we can kind of pilot and innovate some of these things. So, taxing luxury real estate transfers and putting money into our Vermont Housing Conservation Board for affordable housing, or taxing private jet fuel and putting money into green transit. Or as California just proposed this week, they have a ballot initiative, tax billionaire wealth, 5% annual wealth tax on billionaires, put it into a fund to help 15 million people who are losing their Medicaid support. Something like a universal basic income funded by a tax on ultra-high net worth individuals. And, we're not just taxing to pay for things. We're taxing to save democracy. At that 30 million and up level, the way we're going to reverse this drift toward oligarchy is through taxing wealth. We used to tax wealth. Now the rich are basically opting out of their taxes at the highest levels. We need to restore that and invest it in things that lift everybody up.
Chuck, I'm curious what you think of the proposal here in Vermont that's come up a couple times in the past few years to tax wealthy Vermonters, people who earn $500,000 or more. Is that something that you think could make a dent in our state towards reducing wealth inequality and funding social services, social safety net programs? Or is this something that should be happening at the federal level for folks at that much higher income bracket that you've been talking about, that 0.01%?
Yeah, I think we can do both. I think we do have a progressive tax system in Vermont, but when you get to within the top 1%, the top tax rate is about the same whether you earn $150,000 income or whether you earn a couple million a year. So we could have, as was proposed 2 years ago, a higher top tax rate on income over $500,000 or over $1 million. Massachusetts did this 4 years ago, and it's made a huge difference. It's raised a huge amount of revenue. All those millionaires are still in the state. They didn't run away. And the state is now making investments in education and infrastructure as the federal government withdraws. But as just to underscore, we can't ignore the federal tax system. And we have to, work to restore the progressivity of the federal tax system. I don't know about you, Michaela, but, in my town meeting, everybody's like talking about local property taxes, and how mad they are at the select board. And the reality is our local town budgets are mostly roads and schools and the health care for employees. It's not a lot of fat on that budget. But people are still mad at their local government and the state government. But what we don't see is 4 decades of invisible tax shifts. We stop taxing the ultra-wealthy at the federal level. We shift those responsibilities to state and local. We stop taxing corporations. we shifted to individuals. We stopped taxing income from wealth, capital gains, and assets, and shifted onto wages. You do that slow motion for 4 decades, and lo and behold, here we are. Our local tax system is carrying the huge responsibilities for things that the federal government used to pay for. So I would argue a reversal of that. Let's tax wealth at the federal level and send block grants back to the states to pay for a lot of the things we need. And Vermonters would benefit from that because so much of the wealth is in, California and New York State. So if we had a federal tax system where a piece of that came to Vermont, we would do better than just trying to figure it all out at the state level.
We have an email from Glynis, who wrote in to say that they have a 21-year-old son who's a programmer, and the billionaire tech class is a very tempting direction for some young people. I've often discussed with my son on how tech billionaires like Elon Musk have contributed to society with electric cars, Starlink, etc. But what about what he's done to USAID, the economy, government workers, etc.? Still, the billionaire lifestyle seems what some people, especially young guys, are aiming for. That's from Glynis. Let's take one more caller here. Catherine is in Brattleboro. Catherine, go ahead.
Yes, hi. You're just down the road from me, so that's nice. And I'm wanting to know what your opinion is about organized labor's power to kind of stall some of this vast inequality.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah,
Chuck?
Catherine, thanks. It's a great question. And, part of why we've become so unequal over the last 50 years is because there was this huge attack on organized labor. The percentage of workers that were in a union went from, 30% of the workforce to less than 10%. So, but the voice of labor and the voice of organized workers, and there's a bunch of kind of new energy, younger workers who are wanting to join unions and organize. So that's a key part of how we're going to fix this. Restore the rights of organized workers, and for people to stand with workers like we did with our school bus drivers here in Brattleboro. You sort of have to say, look, every time they come for low-wage workers and try to squeeze more or push wages down, we need to stand together. I think there's sort of like 3 big issues. There's affordability. How are we going to pay for groceries? How are we going to pay for health care? But how do we deal with affordability is about raising the wage floor. And that's where the fact that the federal minimum wage and the tip minimum wage haven't changed since 2009. So, I encourage people to look for organizations where they can support workers, join unions, understand that's a piece of how we're going to reverse these extreme inequalities.
Chuck Collins of Guilford is the author of the new book, Burned by Billionaires: How Concentrated Wealth and Power Are Ruining Our Lives and Planet. He's going to be making a number of local stops on his book tour next month, including Phoenix Books in Burlington on November 5th and Norwich Bookstore on the 6th. Chuck, your conversation with us today has sparked so many comments and calls. We'll definitely have to return to this topic again soon. And our apologies to everyone who called in, who we couldn't get on the air. But again, it's a really interesting topic, one that is very relevant to Vermont today. And we thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Michaela, and for the great conversations you have every day.
We have to take one more quick break here, but stick around because when we come back, we are going to mark National Co-op Month with Hardwick's Buffalo Mountain Market. And if you are a longtime member of Buffalo Mountain or another local food co-op, call in. Tell us what's special about the place to you. Our number is 800-639-2211. We'll take those calls and hear from Buffalo Mountain in just 1 minute on Vermont Edition. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lefrak. There are more than 60 food co-ops across New England and New York State. They're all locally owned by design by more than 290,000 total members. October is National Co-op Month, and there are lots of different kinds of co-ops, from agricultural ones for farmers to housing co-ops to credit unions. Today, we thought we'd tip our hats to the food co-ops in our region by learning about one in particular, Buffalo Mountain Market in Hardwick over in Caledonia County. Joining us today is the co-op's general manager, Emily Hirschberger. Emily, hi.
Hello, Michaela. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. And also with you there in our Montpelier studio is Annie Gilliard. She's been a member of Buffalo Mountain Market for 50 years and has worked there for 40. Annie, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And listeners, if you have memories of a food co-op starting in your community, or if you are a longtime member of one like Annie is, give us a call. Tell us why it's important to you or how you've seen the co-op change. You can call in at 800-639-2211 or email Vermont Edition at vermontpublic.org. Annie, how many different jobs have you had at the co-op over the last 4 decades?
When I first started, I think our sales were about 200,000, and so each staff did everything. There was 2 staff people. So you did all the ordering, all the running the register, all the stocking, all of it. And then now I'm just the grocery and housewares buyer.
I hear you've tried to retire, but it hasn't quite worked.
Because I missed it so much. It's my community, really.
Yeah.
Which is what it's all about.
Emily, can you tell us a little bit more about what the community is like at the co-op there? Not just among the employees, but the customers as well? I mean, I bet you know most people who walk in the door on any given day.
Not as much as when we were just the natural food co-op. And when we decided a few years ago to purchase the local mom and pop grocery store, the purchase price included all the conventional grocery, and we put it to our members to vote, member owners to vote, and about half the membership voted, and 84% of them said, let's do it. So the community really just expanded into the real community of the town of Hardwick and their surrounding towns, and it's been so beautiful to see, especially in such divided times, to watch everybody come in the store. And still, 3 years later, getting people will come up to me and say, thank you for doing this. You know, we love the store.
Yeah.
And that's community to me.
Emily, what about you? What does the community at Buffalo Mountain look like for you as the general manager?
Hardwick has a strong sense of community in general, where people really do take care of each other. And I think our staff reflects our community as well, of a mixture of political beliefs and ideas. And I know working there, people know that we're all there to feed each other. And I think people like coming into the store because they feel welcomed and that they're represented in the community.
Yeah. Well, Annie just brought up this big change that happened there just a couple years ago when the local grocery store in town was up for sale and members of the co-op voted on whether or not to buy the space and move to the grocery store's larger space and also expand what you all are selling. Could you tell us a little bit more, Emily, about the factors that you were weighing with that decision and with your own vote?
Yes, going into it, I had no intention of thinking we should mix. I thought we had enough organic stuff and enough of a community to support an all-organic grocery store, natural foods grocery store. But in that process of buying the building, it became more and more clear that that building was a part of the community that we didn't always interact with at the old store. And the people that worked there had jobs and families to take care of. And if we just bought the store and shut it down and took away all those jobs, that wouldn't be a good community thing to do either. So we ended up buying the store and keeping both stores running while we renovated the new store with the express intent to maintain the customer base and as many employees as we could, and then combining the stores together. So yeah, it became clear that we wanted to include all of our community. And it was cool too, because during the move process and making that vote, we had a series of community meetings, and it was great for me. I found my own conclusions, but to get the community together and have these big discussions where people would argue or discuss amongst themselves the same things that I saw. So we all worked on it together.
Yeah. And Emily, as a former buyer, was it a jarring change to see how the shelves and people's shopping baskets at the co-op have shifted since this kind of merger of sorts?
I mean, yeah, sure. At first it was. I wasn't used to, having the conventional meats and candies and things available. But what was really cool pretty soon, right away, is to see the shopping carts with mixed products that might be more conventional, but also have that local produce because it's beautiful and it tastes good and it's something they may not get at other stores. So it was pretty cool to see that change happen pretty quickly.
Annie, what do you think?
Wow. I actually, after about 6 months, I went to some of our local producers that always sold to the old store and asked them, how's it going for you now that we're in the new store? And they all said, wow, our sales at Buffalo Mountain have gone up over 60%.
Wow.
And truly, that is what Buffalo Mountain's mission was from the get-go when we started, was to support our local economy and our local community. And, and it didn't matter what it was that they were making, whether it was the local bread bakers or the local vegetable people or the meat producers or any of that. And it truly has been right in with our mission of trying to help our local economy. I think now about between 25 and 28% of our sales is through local products. And I honestly don't think that a lot of the people that had not shopped in our previous store even knew that a lot of those bakers and producers were out there. And so it's been wonderfully educational for everybody.
Annie, you studied cooperative management at St. Mary's University in Nova Scotia. And I wonder if you could share a little bit of what you learned either in that program or just over your many years working at the co-op in Hardwick about how to keep prices as affordable as possible for customers when you're working on such a smaller scale than, say, Shaw's or Price Chopper. How do you keep the co-op a place where lots of people in the community can afford to shop there?
Well, it's a pretty big challenge because you're competing with, corporate America. And as your previous guest described, that's out of control. And so it's constantly a challenge. But the thing that's amazing with co-ops, because they're community owned, we're not leaving the community. It's our community. We're not going to go and just we're not making enough money in this community and shut down and move someplace else. We're there. We're there for the long haul. And so it's really trying to keep that in mind as we figure out what we can mark stuff up without wanting to hurt anyone. We're not trying to gouge people, and that's constantly on our mind, trying to keep prices affordable for people. It shows up in our bottom line in terms of our profit margin is teeny. It's mostly, and plus buying a new building, you're also dealing with paying off your mortgage. And in a few years, we'll be starting to pay off some of our mender loans. And, that kind of looms into the whole mix of how do we do this? Because it's difficult, but it's still our mission because we know our community. We love our community. We really want to make it work for everybody. But it's a daily, number crunch.
Yeah. And speaking of affordability, because of the government shutdown, Vermonters who rely on federal aid to buy food might not get their 3 squares and SNAP benefits as soon as November 1st. Emily, I know that you've been thinking about this a lot, as have other members of the Hardwick community. Is there anything that the co-op can do to support people who might be losing their food assistance?
Yes, it's something we're working on right now because I was looking into it, and it's about 3.6% of our sales is from EBT SNAP benefits. So that shows us that there's a good bit of our community that is reliant upon those benefits. And I'm working together with the food pantry, the library, the Center for Ag Economy, a few other places, seeing what we can do as a whole in the town. And then also there are plans in the works for what we can do as a co-op. I don't want to speak too much about them now because they're still underway, but I'm hoping in the next couple of days we can announce some of our own assistance. And other co-ops do have programs too where if you are eligible for SNAP EBT, you can get additional discounts. It just depends on the co-op and the structure.
And Vermont has a number of long-standing co-ops. I mean, there's the Adamant Co-op, which has been around since 1935. The Putney Food Co-op started in 1941. But as we were talking about earlier in the hour, it does seem like a lot of our society, our economy today is focused on a system of wealth accumulation that stands in pretty direct contrast to some of the like core values and tenets of a co-op and a worker-owned business. Do you, Emily, and then Annie, I'd love to hear from both of you on this. So Emily first, do you think that this business model has staying power in the world we live in today?
Oh, yes. Yeah, these co-ops, the food co-ops you just mentioned, have been around for a while. And I know there's a lot of other co-ops, whether it's housing, electricity, as you mentioned earlier. And I think it's a real viable solution that is different than capitalism, that works within our culture and society. And it does support the community, and it does help the whole community do better. I believe co-ops offer a lot.
Annie, what do you think? Are co-ops here to stay?
Well, they've been around since 1844, and they started in England in a community of weavers that were losing their jobs to industrialization, and a lot of them that had worked for big business. The big business would have the company store. They would put like chalk in the flour to try to make it so that the profits were higher and the people were getting less quality food. And they decided to open a storefront, a grocery storefront, of which they sold about 6 items. And within 50 years, they had, they had ships, they had trains, they had all these things that were moving product around for the people. And it did become an international thing. There is the International Cooperative Alliance, which is global and oversees the co-ops around the world, of which there are many, 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 many. So we're just a small part of a bigger thing that's still around. And they do, this year is the second of the UN declaration for the Year of the Co-ops, Year of Cooperatives. And that, because it's been proven over and over again that co-ops lift the boats in their community, the rising tide of lifting all boats. And so we're around for a while. They were actually more interested in co-ops during these hard economic times because of it is place-based. It is about local. It is about a business being in your community. It's part of the cooperative principles that all co-ops are asked to operate under is concern for community. So we're here for the long haul.
Annie Gilliard is a longtime employee of Buffalo Mountain Market Co-op in Hardwick. Annie, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
And Emily Hirschberger is the general manager of Buffalo Mountain. Emily, thank you.
Thank you.
They both joined us today from Vermont Public Studio in Montpelier. That is all the time that we have for today. Our show was directed by Aaliyah Papes. John Ahrens is our managing producer. Andrea Lorian and Daniela Fierro are our producers. Today's call screener was Rick Barrett, and our theme music is by Myra Flynn. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch up again soon.